St. Louis has one of the largest highway systems in the United States, and almost everyone living in St. Louis has some form of dependency on the highway. I am one of those people. Hailing from Festus in Jefferson County, I've been dependent on the highways for the entirety of my high school career. Areas like Festus that the highways were run through on their way to connect outer areas of the city have led to great development for those areas, but have taken away the small town pride that these areas had before a Walmart had come and taken that pride away. Although previously having been separated from the city, sometimes it's worth asking the question if it was worth the commercialization. On August 22, 1876, St. Louis citizens voted to separate the city and county. In the 1870s, the city controlled almost all the wealth in the area and has thought the county to be corrupt and wasteful. And the state government was using them both to push more taxes on the city residents. The city residents had begun their push for a change in their relationship with the county, and the plan to completely separate gained the most traction. Both sides saw the issues of money and expansion that could occur in the future, but the idea that separate governance would allow the city to thrive rather than having to carry the county with it was too compelling for the city in the late 1800s. As a result of the condition of the Great Divorce, the city would have to provide good roads and bridges for the entire St. Louis region.
You start to see movement from St. Louis City out into the county in massive record numbers, fueled by cultural attitudes like segregation, racism, and or the idea of cheaper homes and bigger homes. But that's not necessarily that it was an either or statement. It was, I could hold segregational beliefs and want bigger home, right? So it kind of feeds into itself. So then what you start to see is then that shift of power and population and economic and political clout from the city to the county.
Moving out to the county was everything a St. Louisan could think of. More land, cheap land, and because segregation was still valued at this point in time, they can get away from what they wanted to in the city and go out to the county. After they would move out, coming into the city regularly wasn't a common thing for most people.
70, 80 years ago, that was not a normal thing for you and I to go down to the city.
Once people had moved out of the city into the county, the highways started to determine what areas were going to thrive.
That traditionally speaking, south of 64, so 40, south of 64, north of 44, you have a high concentration of wealth in what we would call mid-county. Mid-county would be Clayton, Ladue, Frontenac, Kirkwood, Webster, and then continue that west to the next major intrastate, I think it is. 270 would be like Town and Country and Des Peres. So that central core.
The areas that have access to the interstates have been flourishing ever since their creation, as it allows them the freedom to work and travel to almost any place in the region with ease, being within this area of prosperity bordered by the highways. Typically, outside this region is where the wealth starts to decay.
Anything north of Clayton and U City, you're going to start to see economic decline. Anything south of 44, you're going to see economic decline.
Seeing this clear grouping of wealth in the county was nothing short of desirable for people, and seeing that just a quick trip down the highway can get you there was detrimental to the city's future. I think the creation of the highways leading away from the city is a major contributing factor as to why the wealth left the city. It was clear that the urban landscape was changing. After clear groupings of wealth had built up along parts of Interstate 64, which was built in 1926, St. Louis's decline was on the horizon. In the late 40s and early 50s, post-war housing and mortgage policies, cheaper means of building, and new zoning practices were all factors pulling people and businesses away from the cities. However, the easy access of land wasn't the only reason for the surge. The increased usage of the automobile and the interstates was a factor of this decline. These factors opened up the route to rapid development in undeveloped areas in the surrounding city of St. Louis. And the population of St. Louis was taking advantage of it. This huge wave of migration caused a demand for infrastructure never seen before by the city of St. Louis, and led to poor planning of the new highway systems in county areas. After receiving support from the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, the highways were constructed in accordance with standards and designs set forth by the federal government. After this act, the interstates in St. Louis had just sprung up. In 1956, Interstate 70 and 270 were built to create access to West County and St. Charles. In 1957, Interstate 55 was constructed to open up a route to southern Missouri. Finally, in 1972, Interstate 44 was built, connecting the city with the southern parts of St. Louis County. These interstates had certain requirements for speed and safety which were difficult to implement when running a highway through a city that had already been developed. This ended up having a destructive presence in destroying neighborhoods like Interstate 64 did to Mill Creek Valley, instead of having the positive upbringing that was intended. However, this poor planning could have been avoided. It seems that almost common sense to allow the local government to help plan the routes of a highway through their city to help preserve cultural and economic hubs in the region from being destroyed during the creation of the highways.
Mill Creek Valley is a place everybody should know about, but too few people seem to know.
The highways connect every area in St. Louis together, making it possible for people to seemingly do anything in any area that they want to, and necessary for a population that is spread out so far.
For the highways have proven to be extremely necessary to hold together a metropolitan region that's sprawled, land area as far as it has. Certainly, even I live in the city. And if I want to buy a new suit, I might be out in Chesterfield. Sometimes when I want a haircut or a certain, accessory for my clarinet or my camera, I might be in North County.
But it makes you think, what if the highways were never created? Would we have all these businesses and opportunities spread all over the area? Or would they be conveniently located within the city of St. Louis? This urban renewal project of St. Louis that destroyed Mill Creek wasn't originally a plan to destroy a cultural area in St. Louis.
But I guess to the point of how could this happen? It's some of the things that were promised were actually good things, especially the housing component. I think that gets overlooked. We think of urban renewal as all bad. And maybe its execution is the bad part of the story, but some of the intentions are actually good ones. Getting people out of houses where they have a little basket of coal as their only source of heat and have to go to the toilet in the yard and have to draw water out of a well, and moving them into places that have central heat, central plumbing, windows that don't leak, there's no rats biting the children in the middle of the night. That's all good. And that part of the legacy is still needed in cities today, affordable housing and clean, modern places to live. So wasn't achieved in Mill Creek Valley, but it could have been.
The poor city planning and execution, which is a theme throughout roadway planning in St. Louis history, is what led to the urban renewal efforts of Mill Creek not becoming what they should have been, and leading to its destruction and disappearance from history.
So Mill Creek Valley to me is, it's the largest invisible neighborhood in the city.
And the effect of the highway haven't even been as beneficial as they were promised to be.
The areas around the highways, again, have become these kind of dead zones. Highways have severed neighborhoods like Botanical Heights from Shaw. Forest Park is, one whole side of it's a highway. So that whole end of that park on the south side is not pleasant. So most people approach that park from a different direction. It's a planning disaster. And again, in terms of what? To make cars move faster at peak hours. The highways are mostly showcases of traffic volume. They can hold a lot of cars, but not speed. They're not moving fast. Highway 40 at 5 o'clock, you get stuck.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I thought was very interesting was the first time I visited Cairo. Huge city, 20 million people, very dense, and more cars. Everybody drives in Cairo. More cars in St. Louis, if that can be believed. A highway system consists mostly of small, narrow, 4-lane roads, like Forest Park Parkway, that are mostly used intermittently. You'll jump on it for a little while, then you'll jump off and go back into the city. Traffic moves fast. Traffic circulates quickly. Again, it's overcrowded, but they don't have the kind of big highways we have in one of the largest cities in the world, and it works just fine. And again, I think about getting stuck on Highway 40 at 5 o'clock, and it's what's the real difference between this and a city street? And then I think, well, actually, if I hop on Clayton Road to go to the Galleria from downtown, I get there faster. If I hop on Lindell to go to Washington University, I get there faster.
The effects of the highways can be debated all day, They reap lots of benefits for some, and for others, they're the worst thing that have happened to the city. Despite the feeling you may have towards the highways, there's no denial that in St. Louis, there needs to be healing for the wounds these roadways have caused. But now the question is, how?
How do you reverse 60 years of decline? I think the answer is at least proportionate. That is, it's going to take at least 60 years, I think, to regenerate.
Saving the city isn't going to be instant. It's going to take a while. But the most important part of saving the city is for all the people in the St. Louis area, those who live in the city and those who have moved out, need to realize that the survival of the city is imperative to the survival of the entirety of the greater St. Louis area.
And we also, I think, need to figure out where the limits are. Where are we going to stop subsidizing sprawl?
Yeah.
Because St. Louis population has stayed pretty consistent since 1980, about 3 million people. So people are not leaving the region as much as they just keep moving further and further and further out.
Exactly.
And that hurts the city. And in the end, of course, somebody has to pay for the city's resources. It's still the most infrastructure-rich part of the region. Parks, roads, museums, universities, hospitals, they're all here. So the city cannot support that if it continues to shrink.
The highways weren't always bad for the city. When the economic power was in downtown, the highways provided their intended function. They let people who live outside of the city come in and drive to work. But once corporations moved outside, that's when we really felt the damage that the poor planning of the highways could do to the city.
The highways were predicated on the idea that the city would still be the economic center of the region, but the jobs wouldn't follow, that the commuters would go. People would go live in a ranch house and drive downtown to work. But the wheels started coming off in the 60s as more and more corporations moved factories and offices out of the center altogether. And I think that is a moment where the highways began to seem like the worst thing the city's ever did to themselves, almost like a form of suicide. And we're stuck with that legacy.
This legacy is what led to the decline of St. Louis. The idea that everything can be done without a partnership between the city and the county, and it's been present for almost 150 years now in St. Louis, and has done no good for the area.
There's little traces of activity, St. Louis University, Harris Stowe, the Flying Saucer Building, which has become an icon in its own right, but it reads as kind of a dead zone to St. Louis. And a lot of that is because, most of Mill Creek Valley today is Highway 40 and the Forest Park Parkway. Like, so much land is taken up by where those two roads meet, the tangle of ramps. It seems like it's not a place at all.
The effects of a highway that is clearly seen in Mill Creek Valley is not an isolated effect. It has happened to many places all over the country, and if we're not careful, these highways can truly be the final strike for St. Louis.
It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more lanes you build, the more people will drive. If you enable a form of transportation very easily, that's when people are going to make the common denominator. So if you turn a 3-lane highway into 4 lanes, people who might have, taken the bus sometimes or walked somewhere, they're going to be more encouraged to go out and drive. And if you build, you concentrate resources in a manner that driving is really the only efficient way to get between things. So, I don't know, but I don't think it would be the end of the world if we took down some highways in St. Louis. I think the city would reap a lot of benefits.